Hey guys, tonight we wake up somewhere between frozen oxygen deprivation and an ancient bureaucracy that really doesn't care whether you slept well. You blink your eyes open to find yourself lying on a stone floor inside a one-room hut at 11,000 feet above sea level. Not a charming mountaintop Airbnb, but a standard highland shack of the Inca Empire, circa sometime in the 15th century. The llama wool blanket beneath you feels like a damp loofah, and your lungs are staging a quiet rebellion against the thin, icy air. You sit up, clutch your pounding head, and realize you're already behind on your government-mandated day. The good news? You're technically alive. The bad news? So are a few hundred fleas who spent the night cuddled up against your scalp. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're still with me, drop your location and local time in the comments, so I know who else is sleepless and historically curious. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Outside, the mountain air punches your nostrils like it has something to prove. You breathe, if you can call it that, while preparing for a day that will generously include state labor, limited nutrition, and absolutely no say in the matter. You're living under a centralized, top-down system of rule so precise it could track potatoes. Every citizen has their duty, and yours has been selected for you, possibly by someone in Cusco who has never worn sandals. Your stone shack is one of many scattered along the Empire's vast network of settlements. There's no insulation, no privacy, and no such thing as a personal moment. The family next to you has 10 people sleeping head to foot in a space smaller than a food truck. Their goat is the only one who seems well rested. You hear the wooden flute that signals the start of the workday, an ancient alarm clock that doesn't believe in snooze buttons. As you stagger outside, you're hit with your first history lesson. The Inca didn't invent the wheel, but they perfected control. Every community was catalogued, taxed, and shuffled around like game pieces. You are not a person. You are a warm body assigned to a quota. You're also freezing. Despite the sun, it's barely above freezing this high in the Andes. Your hands tremble as you lace up your sandals, thin leather straps over calloused feet that have never heard of arch support. You'll be walking all day on unforgiving stone, so go ahead and say goodbye to your toenails. Your assignment? March with a bundle of imperial goods to the next administrative checkpoint, on foot, naturally. These goods are wrapped in woven cloth and blessed with rituals, which sadly do not include making them lighter. The Inca had no money economy, so instead they relied on labor tax. You work for the state, and in return, the state gives you the privilege of not being punished. Fair trade, really. As you begin walking the Inca Road, you can't help but marvel between wheezes at its design. These roads climb cliffs, cut through jungles, and bridge canyons with ancient engineering so precise, modern hikers still get impressed. The stones are laid so tightly together that grass rarely grows between them. Not that you're enjoying the scenery. You're too busy tripping over your own legs and wondering how far it is to the next tambo. Tambo? Ah, yes, the imperial rest stations. But don't get excited. They're more functional than fun. Think of them like medieval highway motels, except with no beds, no plumbing, and a very real chance of being asked to do chores before you're allowed to sleep. Meanwhile, your stomach begins whispering threats. Breakfast is coming, eventually, but it won't be much more than dried corn, maybe a bite of freeze-dried potato. It's called chuño, and it tastes about as good as it sounds. Chalky, cold, and crunchy in the wrong places. Some people actually enjoyed it. Historians still argue whether chuño was a clever survival food or a deeply personal insult to your taste buds. The sun crests over the mountains as your bundle digs into your shoulder, and you wonder, briefly, what would happen if you just kept walking in the other direction. But don't worry. Someone would notice. The Inca had a surprisingly effective surveillance system based on word of mouth, observation, and general nosiness. If you disappear, the state finds out. And they don't send a search party. They send your replacement. You keep walking, your knees creak, the air thins, and you realize the road ahead is both literal and metaphorical. This is the first hour of the day, and you're already contemplating existentialism. Welcome to the Inca Empire, where the empire marches on, with or without your full consent. You haven't even reached the first bend in the mountain road when your stomach finally files an official complaint. It makes a noise that echoes off the stone and is probably illegal in 3 provinces. Breakfast, such as it is, arrives in the form of a small cloth pouch given to you by a stone-faced local official who treats it like it contains diamonds. Inside? Chuño. Again. Yes. The legendary freeze-dried potato, the one prepared by trampling fresh tubers underfoot during frosty nights and then leaving them out in the sun like expired meatballs. It's as crunchy as a roof tile and tastes like damp regret. But here in the Andes, it's a miracle. Lightweight, portable, and capable of surviving apocalypse-level storage conditions. And you're going to need it, because lunch isn't coming for another 12 miles. You try not to chew it too loudly, because the Chasqui messengers running past you are giving you judgmental side-eye. These men are the Olympic sprinters of the Inca world, trained to run up mountains with messages in hand and calves sculpted by divine punishment. They don't stop to chat. They barely breathe. One zips by, wearing nothing but a tunic and sandals, carrying a knotted rope called a quipu, an Inca version of Excel spreadsheets, but made of yarn. It records census data, grain counts, and probably your current level of personal embarrassment. Historians still argue whether quipus were purely mathematical or included a hidden narrative code, Inca diary entries disguised as long division. Either way, it's faster than your current method of communication, which involves hoping someone hears you gasping from uphill. You trudge on. The altitude is making you dizzy, and the path is barely wide enough for a llama, let alone your bundle and pride. Speaking of llamas, one spits in your direction, unimpressed by your attempt to shuffle out of its way. These woolly judgment machines are the Empire's only pack animals. No wheels, remember. So every bag, every load, every tribute item gets carried by either a llama or a very unwilling human. That human is usually you. Suddenly, you hear a whistle from behind. A guard approaches, young, stern, and radiating the type of enthusiasm only absolute authority can provide. He demands your travel token, which is a carved stick bearing symbols that approve your presence on this stretch of road. You hand it over, and he squints at it like it's a forged coupon. Apparently, bureaucracy in the Inca Empire is less about innocent until proven guilty, and more, how dare you not have your llama permit? He lets you go reluctantly, and you continue your climb. The incline gets steeper. Your calves are singing a song called "We Regret Every Life Choice." You pass another tambo, where a few officials are taking inventory. Not napping, not chatting. Inventory. That's how tightly wound this system is. Every bushel of corn, every tunic, every shard of obsidian is counted, logged, and possibly blessed. You consider stealing a nap in a storage room, but remember, this is a society that can spot a missing potato from 40 kilometers away. By late morning, the sun is high and roasting your face with cheerful malice. Your tunic is drenched in sweat. You reach the top of a ridge and see, sprawling below you, a stretch of road so precisely laid it could host a chariot race, if only there were chariots. Instead, you're looking at a masterpiece of stonework. No mortar, no glue, just rocks cut so perfectly they click together like Lego, withstanding centuries of earthquakes, tourists, and your slow-motion panic. You collapse at a rest point and finally exhale, only for a supervisor to shout something about not enough pace. He's holding a tally stick and recording your speed. That's right, you're being performance reviewed. On a mountain. It's enough to make you consider rebelling, but don't. Inca justice is swift, creative, and rarely funny if you're on the receiving end. Punishments range from relocation to forced labor to public shaming with feathers. There's a reason compliance is so high. That, and the sheer distance between you and any place where rebellion might matter. Just before noon, you're allowed a break. You pull out your last few bites of maize and sit on a rock so flat and smooth, you wonder if it's been shaped just for weary souls like yours. Probably not. But it feels like a minor blessing in a landscape that demands every ounce of energy just to stand upright. As the sun bakes your scalp and the air tastes like sky itself, you realize that the Inca Road is not just a road. It's an extension of the Empire's spine, carrying goods, people, messages, and, most uncomfortably, expectations. And today, you are both cargo and crew. You chew the last of your chuño, brush the dust from your thighs, and stand. Only 14 more miles to go. You haven't even reached the first bend in the mountain road when your stomach finally files an official complaint. It makes a noise that echoes off the stone and is probably illegal in 3 provinces. Breakfast, such as it is, arrives in the form of a small cloth pouch given to you by a stone-faced local official who treats it like it contains diamonds. Inside? Chuño! Again? Yes, the legendary freeze-dried potato. The one prepared by trampling fresh tubers underfoot during frosty nights and then leaving them out in the sun like expired meatballs. It's as crunchy as a roof tile and tastes like damp regret. But here in the Andes, it's a miracle. Lightweight, portable, and capable of surviving apocalypse-level storage conditions. And you're going to need it, because lunch isn't coming for another 12 miles. You try not to chew it too loudly, because the Chasqui messengers running past you are giving you judgmental side-eye. These men are the Olympic sprinters of the Inca world, trained to run up mountains with messages in hand and calves sculpted by divine punishment. They don't stop to chat. They barely breathe. One zips by wearing nothing but a tunic and sandals, carrying a knotted rope called a quipu, an Inca version of Excel spreadsheets, but made of yarn. It records census data, grain counts, and probably your current level of personal embarrassment. Historians still argue whether quipus were purely mathematical or included a hidden narrative code, Inca diary entries disguised as long division. Either way, it's faster than your current method of communication, which involves hoping someone hears you gasping from uphill. You trudge on. The altitude is making you dizzy, and the path is barely wide enough for a llama, let alone your bundle and pride. Speaking of llamas, one spits in your direction, unimpressed by your attempt to shuffle out of its way. These woolly judgment machines are the Empire's only pack animals. No wheels, remember? So every bag, every load, every tribute item gets carried by either a llama or a very unwilling human. That human is usually you. Suddenly, you hear a whistle from behind. A guard approaches, young, stern, and radiating the type of enthusiasm only absolute authority can provide. He demands your travel token, which is a carved stick bearing symbols that approve your presence on this stretch of road. You hand it over, and he squints at it like it's a forged coupon. Apparently, bureaucracy in the Inca Empire is less about innocent until proven guilty, and more, how dare you not have your llama permit? He lets you go reluctantly, and you continue your climb. The incline gets steeper. Your calves are singing a song called We Regret Every Life Choice. You pass another tambo where a few officials are taking inventory. Not napping, not chatting. Inventory. That's how tightly wound this system is. Every bushel of corn, every tunic, every shard of obsidian is counted, logged, and possibly blessed. You consider stealing a nap in a storage room, but remember, this is a society that can spot a missing potato from 40 kilometers away. By late morning, the sun is high and roasting your face with cheerful malice. Your tunic is drenched in sweat. You reach the top of a ridge and see, sprawling below you, a stretch of road so precisely laid it could host a chariot race, if only there were chariots. Instead, you're looking at a masterpiece of stonework. No mortar, no glue, just rocks cut so perfectly they click together like Lego, withstanding centuries of earthquakes, tourists, and your slow-motion panic. You collapse at a rest point and finally exhale, only for a supervisor to shout something about not enough pace. He's holding a tally stick and recording your speed. That's right. You're being performance reviewed. On a mountain. It's enough to make you consider rebelling, but don't. Inca justice is swift, creative, and rarely funny if you're on the receiving end. Punishments range from relocation to forced labor to public shaming with feathers. There's a reason compliance is so high. That, and the sheer distance between you and any place where rebellion might matter. Just before noon, you're allowed a break. You pull out your last few bites of maize and sit on a rock so flat and smooth, you wonder if it's been shaped just for weary souls like yours. Probably not. But it feels like a minor blessing in a landscape that demands every ounce of energy just to stand upright. As the sun bakes your scalp and the air tastes like sky itself, you realize that the Inca Road is not just a road, it's an extension of the Empire's spine, carrying goods, people, messages, and, most uncomfortably, expectations. And today, you are both cargo and crew. You chew the last of your chuño, brush the dust from your thighs, and stand. Only 14 more miles to go. You were hoping for food. Not fine dining, just something warm, maybe chewy. Instead, you get a handful of dried maize, several bites too old to be called edible, and a questionable jerky that smells like sadness. This is the culinary highlight of your day on the Inca Road, not because it's especially good, but because it's the only thing you've managed to choke down since sunrise. Charqui, that's what they call the jerky. Dried, salted strips of llama or alpaca, depending on which animal was unlucky enough to walk a little slower than the rest. It's tough enough to sharpen a knife on, but hey, it won't go bad for months. Centuries, maybe. Historians still argue whether Inca messengers actually liked the taste or simply developed an emotional bond with the food through prolonged chewing. You bite into it. Your jaw clicks. You bite again. Your soul weeps. On the side of the road, a tambo keeper offers you a drink. It's warm, slightly cloudy, and smells like something between sour bread and athletic regret. Chicha, fermented corn beer, was the energy drink of choice back then. Made by chewing corn and spitting it into a vat to ferment, chicha is a beverage built on community spirit and saliva. You nod politely, take the smallest sip imaginable, and instantly regret every decision that's led to this moment. Still, it's better than river water. The Inca Road doesn't exactly run parallel to sparkling bottled spring streams. You're lucky to find a puddle that hasn't been pre-digested by wildlife. And bathing? You're joking, right? Bathing isn't just impractical, it's considered risky. Opens your pores, they say, with the same solemnity modern people use for identity theft. Wet skin invites spirits, ghosts, and probably pneumonia. You stay dry and fragrant in the worst way. You trudge on, your stomach offering delicate gurgles of protest. Hunger is a loyal companion here. You pass porters, men who've been hauling tribute goods for miles barefoot, each carrying a load half their own weight. One of them carries a live duck, its wings bound and its expression disturbingly judgmental. You look into its beady little eyes and sense that it pities you. Midday hits. The sun, your relentless nemesis, burns overhead, baking the stones until they radiate misery. There's no shade, no trees, no rest stop with a polite sign saying, "Traveler, refresh thyself." You sit on a rock, attempt to rearrange your limbs into something that resembles comfort, and open your pouch for lunch. More maize, one nut, and something green that you pray is a leaf. You chew slowly, as if savoring might disguise the fact that you're basically eating sadness trail mix. Still, nutrition wasn't entirely neglected by the Inca. Their storage system, cloaks, held freeze-dried potatoes, chuño, salted meat, grains, and dried fruit. Genius, really. It's just that none of it tastes like anything other than ancient disappointment. You pick at a piece of chuño, which crumbles into cold, chalky dust. Legend has it, these potatoes are stomped on barefoot during freezing nights to create their distinct flavor profile. Foot-crafted, you whisper, trying not to taste the toe history. Nearby, a group of runners, the Shaski, takes a break. These elite messengers travel relay style, sprinting short distances before passing off the message or item. One of them eyes you curiously as you gnaw on your chuño. You nod, pretending you belong here, pretending your mouth isn't a powdery graveyard. He raises an eyebrow, then tosses you something, a packet of coca leaves. This, finally, is the good stuff. Coca is not a snack, not really. It's a mild stimulant chewed to fight fatigue and altitude sickness. You stuff the leaves into your cheek and wait. Slowly, the numbness sets in. Your limbs feel lighter, your feet ache a little less. You still want to cry, but now you can do it with a slight smile. Coca leaves were sacred, not recreational. Used in rituals and ceremonies, they were considered gifts from the gods. But today, they're your lunch break therapy. You chew and stare at the horizon, half dazed, half conscious. Your tongue feels like wet cloth, your throat like old rope. But your spirit is upright, kind of. You pass another tambo. This one smells strongly of garlic and desperation. A local woman offers you a small bowl, soup, possibly. It has floating chunks of something vaguely meat-adjacent and herbs you don't recognize. You say thank you. You sip. You do not ask questions. You eat in silence, like a pilgrim confronting divine mystery. You even leave a few sips behind for the spirits. Or the mice. Same difference. Food in the Empire was never about pleasure. It was fuel. It was duty. It was community. Often communal, usually grey. And on the road, it was luck. You count your blessings. You've eaten something not actively trying to kill you. You've had a beverage with only mild microbial concerns, and you're only partially dehydrated, which counts as thriving. The sun tilts westward. You stand, stretch, and pick a bit of chuño dust out of your molars. Your stomach isn't full, but it's not hollow either. That's a win. And the taste of llama jerky is now permanently etched into your soul. Also a win, depending on how you define trauma. You walk on, slightly nauseated, moderately empowered, and totally unsure whether you'll be alive by dusk. But for now, you've eaten. You knew you weren't getting athleisure wear, but this is performance art in the form of suffering. Your Inca road trip outfit is best described as prehistoric survival chic, stitched entirely from stiff wool, camelid hair, and sheer endurance. You slide on your tunic, thick, boxy, and woven from the rough fibers of an alpaca who clearly had personal vendettas, and it feels like someone wrapped you in artisanal sandpaper. Fashion is not the goal here. function is. The Inca textiles are famous, some of the finest in the pre-Columbian world. But what you're wearing is not for royalty. You're in the working class collection. One tunic, one sash, and if you're lucky, a tattered cloak that smells like wet dog even when dry. Historians still argue whether commoners had distinct seasonal clothing, but your armpits vote no. Whatever this is, it's one size fits nobody. You attempt to walk, but the fibers rub like steel wool against your thighs. Welcome to the chafe zone. You try adjusting the sash, tied tightly around your waist like a belt with trust issues, but the moment you loosen it, your tunic flaps open like an abandoned tent. It's not just about dignity, it's windproofing, body coverage, and carrying pouch all in one, and somehow still useless. Let's talk shoes. You don't get any. Or if you do, they're more suggestion than footwear. Little rawhide flaps tied to your feet with string. They protect your soles the same way a napkin protects you from a flood. The rocks on the Inca road laugh quietly as you limp forward. And forget traction. One wrong step and you're inventing ancient slip-and-fall lawsuits. A noble in fine sandals might stride confidently. You, however, develop a gait best described as cautiously doomed. You're sweating already, even before the sun crests the ridge. The fabric does not breathe. It wheezes. And when the sun dips and the chill creeps in, that same wool garment traps moisture like it's preserving your essence for future archaeologists. Your own body heat becomes your worst enemy. Every drop of sweat you produce soaks in, fermenting in your clothes like a microbrewery of regret. At night, there's no changing into pajamas. There are no pajamas. You sleep in what you wore all day, which is what you wore yesterday, which is what you will wear tomorrow. You may be spiritually cleansed from walking the sacred road, but physically you smell like betrayal. Laundry? Bold of you to assume water is available for such bourgeois luxuries. Most travelers just aired their clothes out or gave them a solid beating against rocks. Soap, if it existed, was a precious slurry of ash, clay, and hope. You try to remember what dryer sheets smelled like. You can't. Your cloak now doubles as a mosquito net and a personal odor chamber. But let's say you manage to find a stream and strip for a quick rinse. Surprise! You're now an exposed buffet for the Andes' elite bug society. Lice, fleas, and ticks adore sweaty wool. They set up shop immediately. You scratch, you twitch. You curse your past self for romanticizing ancient adventure. Now your tunic crawls with guests who don't pay rent and never leave. You pass a noble caravan. The contrast is brutal. The nobleman's clothing is finer, richly dyed with cochineal reds or indigo blues, natural dyes that scream status. His cloak flows, his sandals shine, his llama even has fringe. And here you are, decorated in grime and humility, looking like a half-cooked meatloaf trying to pass for a human. Still, there's one small comfort. The sash around your waist can carry things, leaves, coca, a lucky stone. It's your pocket in a world that hasn't invented pants yet. And when you're sitting by a fire, okay, watching someone else's fire from a respectful distance, your cloak actually feels kind of nice. It insulates, it hugs, it apologizes. But tomorrow, when it's stiff again and smells faintly of feet and burnt root vegetables, you'll question everything. Again. Inca clothing wasn't meant to dazzle. It was a flag. It told others your rank, your origin, your allegiance. For warriors, it could even be camouflaged with mountain dyes. For you, it screams temporary guest and fashion last picked in gym class. You try to sleep, curled up under your itchy, slightly damp cloak. The stars wheel overhead. The wind seeps through the weave. You shiver, you itch, you breathe into your tunic, pretending it's warm. Somewhere nearby, a flea begins its nightly commute. This is not a look. This is a lifestyle. Dental hygiene in the Inca Empire is not so much a concept as it is a slow-burning horror story told entirely through gum inflammation and personal tragedy. You wake up with that now familiar taste of morning. Equal parts charcoal, sour leaves, and something you're hoping is plant-based. Your breath alone could start a controlled burn in a eucalyptus forest. You reach for nothing, because toothbrushes haven't been invented yet. Neither has toothpaste, or floss, or even the idea that teeth matter after puberty. You try to rub your gums with your finger, the way some villagers do, but all it does is relocate the pain. Your gums are already puffy, and you haven't even reached your 20s yet. The good news, you're alive. The bad news, so are your cavities. They've unionized and are actively campaigning for more territory, and there's no dentist to strike a deal with. Some Inca communities reportedly use chewed sticks or fibrous roots to clean their teeth, but the practice is patchy. Maybe your village has one of those twigs. Maybe it doesn't. Either way, the technique is about as effective as washing your feet by thinking about soap. Historians still argue whether the Inca had any real form of regular dental care or just quietly accepted that tooth loss was a life stage somewhere between first haircut and last breath. You chew coca leaves to manage the hunger and altitude sickness. The leaves taste bitter and chalky, and they come with the delightful side effect of staining your teeth greenish-brown. On the bright side, it adds camouflage. On the not-so-bright side, it also numbs your mouth enough that you don't notice when a molar finally gives up and cracks in protest. You spit out a chunk of yourself like a tragic souvenir. And the pain. Oh, the pain. There's no Novocaine, no Tylenol, just coca leaves and prayer. If you're lucky, someone knows a chant that supposedly eases tooth pain. If you're unlucky, and let's face it, you are, someone recommends pressing hot stones against your jaw to drive out the spirit. It doesn't work. Now you just have burns and cavities. 2 problems for the price of none. There is a man in your village rumored to be a healer. You visit him. He's also the guy who blesses cornfields and occasionally exorcises llamas, so confidence is low. He examines your mouth, then produces what looks like a bent fishhook and a mallet. There is no chair, no sterile gloves, just dirt, resolve, and the ambient sound of people pretending not to watch. What follows is not dental surgery, it's a performance art piece about pain and regret. The tooth comes out. Most of it. You think. There's blood, followed by panic, followed by an herbal compress shoved into your jaw like a cork in a leaky wine bottle. You thank him. He nods solemnly, then asks for a potato as payment. You give him 2 out of sheer gratitude for not accidentally removing your tongue. You're now the proud owner of a crater in your jaw. It will never heal properly. It will become infected. But it's not fatal yet. So you walk home, clutching your face like a dramatic opera singer. You lie down, trying not to cry, because salt water makes it burn more. And when sleep comes, it's thin and shivery and interrupted by your tongue constantly checking the new hole in your mouth like a nosy neighbor. It gets worse. Someone you know had all their teeth removed by 40. Not because of vanity or Instagram filters, but because it was easier to gum boiled maize than deal with toothaches. This person now eats everything mushy and never smiles wide. You start to understand why. The nobles might have fared better, but even they weren't immune. Their diets were richer, yes, but more sugar means more rot. You once heard a story of an Inca prince who refused to eat for a week due to molar agony. They built a temple after he recovered. You plan to just not scream next time and maybe get a rock named in your honor. Remember when we said the roads were brutal? Well, they're a dream compared to the inside of your own mouth. You could march for days with blisters and sore muscles. But one infected tooth can drop you like a jaguar from a tree. It's the small, unwashed, neglected things that break you. You think about modern dental checkups, reclining chairs, and bubblegum-flavored polish. You imagine fluoride, mint toothpaste, and dentists who say things like, "You'll feel a small pinch." The concept feels fictional, like winged llamas or showers. Your toothbrush, if it existed, would be just another splintery stick next to your cloak peg. So you chew carefully, very carefully, because every bite might be your last good one. And because you already gave away your only spare potato. You're officially bankrupt in dental insurance and root vegetables. The empire may be vast, the roads may be eternal, but your teeth, not so much. The sun hasn't even climbed above the ridge when you're already being shouted at to move. Labor in the Inca Empire begins not with a gentle yawn, but with an abrupt, echoing reminder that your body is state property. You roll off your straw mat, assuming you even got a mat, and land with the grace of a sack of quinoa. The morning air is thin, sharp, and judgmental. You're 22 years old, and your spine has the personality of a bitter retiree. You start your day like every other day, by trudging into someone else's field. You are part of the MITA system, a beautiful bureaucratic word that translates loosely into mandatory unpaid labor forever. The good news, you're not a slave. The bad news, you work like one. Service to the empire sounds noble until you realize it means digging canals with a pointy stick. Historians still argue whether the mitar was exploitative forced labor or a clever form of tax payment in a currency-free society. One side imagines it as community building with benefits. The other side points out your calluses, and that time your cousin passed out in a potato trench. You form no opinion. You're too busy counting your remaining toes after yesterday's irrigation duty. You hoe, you dig, you carry, and occasionally you chant, a rhythmic, dull thump of work songs that barely covers the existential dread. There's no real weekend, no me time. Your mental health routine consists of humming sadly and not making eye contact with your supervisor. The field stretches endlessly, a patchwork of brown that drinks your sweat but never says thank you. If you're male, congratulations. You might get picked for road work, which is the Inca version of corporate promotion. You leave your home for weeks, maybe months, to carry rocks, sand, and timber up the Andes. Want a vacation? Too bad. You're building the vacation trail for someone else. And if you're female, the situation isn't better, just differently painful. You rise at dawn, sweep the dirt floor, which stubbornly remains dirt. Prepare food, grind maize by hand, fetch water in giant clay vessels, tend to the children, the animals, the fire, and the general emotional well-being of everyone except yourself. You're a walking to-do list in human form. Occasionally, you're chosen to weave textiles for the Empire, which sounds artistic until you realize it involves sitting hunched for 14 hours over thread made from camelid hair and your own hope. Even children don't escape this empire-wide workout program. At 5, they start helping. At 7, they're practically interns. Your own son recently graduated from wobbling with purpose to carrying rocks like a grown man. He's proud. You're terrified. His knees are already plotting revenge. Your tools? Ah, yes. One might hope for a shiny bronze spade, or at least a sharpened shovel. What you get is something between a club and a paddle. Maybe a pointed stick with an ego. Your arms are strong, yes, but only because you use them as your primary excavators. It's less technology and more emotional commitment to suffering. Every so often, an official in a feathered headdress checks in to see how things are going. He smiles, nods, and makes notes on a quipu, a system of knots that allegedly records labor, taxes, and maybe how many times you cursed under your breath. You wonder if it also logs internal screaming. The Empire's data storage is impressively judgmental. Midday comes, you get a break, a cup of chicha, fermented corn beer, lukewarm and suspicious, and a lump of cornmeal with a small blessing. You sit under a tree, every muscle vibrating like it's considering retirement. You look at your hands. They are not hands, they are cracked maps of pain. One of your neighbors whispers about a cousin who became a Yanakona, a royal servant who lives in the capital and tends to nobility. Less digging, more scrubbing, fewer blisters, more eye contact with emperors. It sounds luxurious until you remember they're not allowed to leave. Ever. It's like being promoted into a really clean prison. And yet, there is structure here. You understand your place. You contribute to something massive. You're part of the veins that pump life into the Empire. And the Empire, it always wants more. More roads, more temples, more food, more labor. You're not a citizen. You're a cell in a muscular state organism that doesn't care whether you thrive or collapse, as long as your replacements are born on time. By dusk, you stumble back home. Your knees are gone. Your soul is faxing its resignation. You sit down and take a deep breath, only to remember that tomorrow is roof thatching duty. A light rain begins to fall, as if to rehearse your next series of wet inconveniences. Still, there's one absurd comfort. You're not alone. Every other villager looks like a clay sculpture that's been dropped too many times. You all limp together, laugh together, grieve over shared foot injuries. Someone cracks a joke about being too tired to die. You chuckle, then you cough. Then you go inside, collapse, and dream of soft beds that don't exist. The tools are primitive, the expectations are superhuman. But the worst part? You're starting to get used to it.
Rain slaps you awake. Not in the romantic way either. You're soaked through your wool poncho, which was never waterproof, never warm, and never meant for this altitude in the first place. The roof is leaking again. You consider scooting over to a drier corner of the hut, only to remember there are no dry corners, just varying degrees of soggy. Welcome to the Inca Highlands, where the weather is not a gentle background feature, but an active antagonist in your life story. Today it's cold, shivering, bone-tapping. Am I awake or frozen? Cold. But give it a few months, and this same house will turn into a clay oven that even bread wouldn't envy. You are either steaming or freezing. There is no thermostat. There is only suffering. The Inca Empire spans almost every climate zone imaginable, from the sweltering Pacific coast to the damp cloud forests and the icebox that is the Andes. Unfortunately, you live in the Andes. Up here, the air is so thin, it feels like it's been filtered for suffering. Your lungs wheeze with every movement. You're not breathing so much as negotiating. You wrap another blanket around your shoulders. It's made from alpaca wool, which sounds luxurious until you feel the texture. It's soft in theory, scratchy in practice, and soaked in the faint odor of last month's effort to clean it, which involved river water and hope. Historians still argue whether the Incas developed effective heating solutions for mountain homes or whether everyone simply froze artistically. There's evidence of small hearths, but using fire inside a thatched hut is less cozy and more accidental self-cremation. So most people just huddle together, family style, like sentient guinea pigs. Speaking of which, yes, you probably share your bed with at least one guinea pig. They're warm, they're wiggly, they're dinner next week. During the dry season, the temperature drops to freezing at night, and then rockets to skin boiling by midday. It's like being tossed between two ovens on different settings. 1 minute, you're cursing your numb fingers. The next, you're sweating so much you consider licking a cactus. At least that's full of water and spikes, but mostly water. Your clothes do not help. You own exactly one outfit. It is not fashionable. It is not clean. It does not match your skin tone. It is the same tunic you wore last week, last month, and probably last harvest festival. You layer on scraps to survive the cold, peeling them off again by mid-morning as if playing a very depressing game of thermal Jenga. And don't even dream about sandals. If you're lucky, you get ojotas, thin soles made from llama hide that offer all the support of a wilted tortilla. Most days it's barefoot. The rocks become your exfoliant. The mud becomes your moisturizer. The insects? Oh, they're just your entourage. Summers are worse. The rain stops, but now the sun wants you dead. You trudge to the fields and return with a nose so burnt it could pass for ceremonial paint. Shade? There is no shade. You are shade, offered up to the gods like a heat-stroke-flavored popsicle. Meanwhile, your home, already modest in ambition, transforms based on the season. In the rainy months, it's a moldy cave with a wind tunnel. In the dry months, it's a cracked clay box, where every breath stirs dust older than your grandparents. You once tried hanging a wet tunic to dry. 3 hours later, it was still wet, but somehow also covered in ash. And here's a fun tidbit. Elite Incas lived in palaces with stone walls that trapped heat and reflected light. Some even had interior courtyards and storage pits. You get a hut with opinions. It creaks, it leaks, it judges. The elite burn incense. You burn your patience. Despite it all, you go outside. You work. You nod to neighbors who look like weather-beaten statues. You wave to a passing llama, which gives you a look that says, "At least I don't have taxes." You squint at the horizon, and for a moment, you wonder what the coast feels like. But you've never been. You'll never go. The only journey you're making is between cold feet and overheated scalp. By dusk, clouds gather again. Rain whispers its approach, and you brace for another damp night. There is no heating, no firewood, just body heat, old blankets, and the collective willpower of people pretending to be comfortable. You lie down beside your family. A breeze curls in through the thatch, straight up your tunic. You shiver. You sigh. You dream of central heating, a magic spell from the future, where the weather is optional and the floor doesn't bite your toes. The next morning, it starts again. You crouch next to the stream, cradling a clay jar that smells faintly like yesterday's maize porridge and despair. Your job is simple: fetch water. But in the Inca Empire, simple jobs are often secret auditions for survival-based reality shows, with no camera, no prize money, and definitely no water filter. The water is cloudy again. Not exactly the crystalline mountain spring you see in postcards or, well, you would see in postcards if anyone here had invented those yet. You try not to stare too hard at the suspicious particles swirling in the jar like microscopic sea monsters. Maybe it's just dirt. Maybe it's dysentery with a personality. You take a tentative sip anyway. It's earthy. by which we mean slightly mossy, questionably alive, and with notes of goat. But hydration is hydration until it turns on you. Historians still argue whether the Incas boiled their water regularly or simply evolved stronger intestines through sheer generational trauma. You, however, are not genetically prepared. The first few days are a gastrointestinal adventure. After that, your body just gives up and hopes the parasites will leave you alone out of pity. The truth is, water in the Inca world is everywhere, just not safe water. You're surrounded by mountains that channel snowmelt and rain into streams and irrigation systems, many of which are engineering marvels. The Inca aqueducts can stretch for miles, descending from high-altitude springs in mathematically precise gradients. It's beautiful, it's brilliant, it's completely unaffordable for you. Most of the clean water is diverted to elite estates or ceremonial sites. The rest? Well, that's your neighborhood stream, also known as the communal wash zone, drinking spot, and animal toilet. On special days, you might be invited to a ceremonial bath in a sacred pool. That sounds elegant until you realize it's less of a spa and more of a mass baptism in bacteria. Bathing, after all, is risky business. There's an actual belief that washing too frequently opens your body to illness. So naturally, most people skip it altogether. You included. You haven't bathed in a while. And even when you do, it's more of a splash and sprint situation. No soap, no shampoo, no loofah. Just cold water, rough hands, and the existential dread of stripping down in front of half the village. Your skin feels tight, your hair is developing its own ecosystem, and your fingernails tell the story of every crop you've touched in the last 6 weeks. You've got peasant patina, a rustic glow made entirely of dust, grease, and grass stains. And you're not alone. Your family glistens with a similar sheen. The good news, no one smells worse than anyone else. The bad news, that's not a compliment. When illness does strike, and it will, the community healer arrives with a basket of leaves, animal bones, and enough spiritual energy to frighten a rainstorm. You lie back as they chant, wave herbs, and occasionally blow alcohol on your face. If that doesn't work, you get fed fermented corn mash and a warning about mountain spirits. You try not to think about what's actually making you sick. Giardia, typhoid, just a touch of unwashed dead alpaca syndrome. The medical consensus, such as it is, blames bad winds and possibly your bad attitude. Of course, this is all before you remember where your drinking jar came from. That's right. It's the same one your uncle used to carry urine for a purification ritual last month. He says it's been scrubbed. You believe him. But the taste of regret is hard to wash out. You look around your house. There's no well, no bucket brigade, no emergency bottled water under the bed. Mostly because beds don't exist, and bottles haven't been invented yet. If a drought hits, you walk farther. If a flood comes, you hope your hut floats. Water is sacred. Water is deadly. Water is always watching. In the back of your mind, a question lingers. How did people not die constantly? Well, many of them did. Infant mortality was high. Average life expectancy was low. And even if you dodged war, famine, or llama-related accidents, a bad sip of water could still take you out faster than a jealous neighbor. But you keep drinking. You have to. You sip, you cough. You whisper a prayer to Inti, the sun god, who probably doesn't handle plumbing. And then you swallow. Just like that, another day begins.
Now, we find ourselves waking up on the frostbitten edge of the Han Dynasty, about as far from the Forbidden Palace as you can physically, spiritually, and hygienically be. You would never think that surviving in a well-organized empire like Han China could feel like being exiled to a wooden box full of snoring men and unspeakable odors. But here you are. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, Post your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where and when you're watching from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The first thing you notice isn't the cold, it's the distinct smell of feet. Yours, possibly. But there are other contenders. You're in a cramped barracks, jammed wall to wall with young men and older regrets, all wrapped in mats made from woven straw that, if tested in a lab, would likely come back as 40% mildew and 60% unidentifiable sadness. You try to stretch, but your spine resists, as though it's questioning your life choices. The floor beneath you groans a dramatic, moody floor, obviously offended that you dare shift your weight without permission. Above you, beams sag under the accumulated weight of snow and indifference. You were promised a life of martial honor and civil respect. Instead, you get a splinter the size of a hairpin lodged under your fingernail before you've even stood up. The walls of the barracks do nothing to stop the cold. They let it in like an honored guest. The wind weaves through every crack and knot in the wood like a curious spirit. And you start your day already wishing it was tomorrow. There's no rooster to greet the dawn, but your bunkmate's snoring serves as a pretty convincing war horn. It rattles through the room like a broken drum. You briefly debate stuffing millet into his nose. The garrison sits somewhere along the Empire's northwestern frontier. Which frontier doesn't matter. If there's sand, rocks, and the looming anxiety of steppe invasions, congrats. You've made it. Outside the barracks lies a courtyard so dry, your breath feels like it's getting splinters. You step out barefoot for a second, just long enough to regret everything. This particular garrison was built as part of the Empire's defensive lattice against the ever-unpredictable Xiongnu. Historians still argue whether these frontier posts were more symbolic than functional, like a stern eyebrow raised at nomadic raiders. But symbolic or not, you're here, and your toes are slowly turning into chalk. As you line up with the other soldiers, you exchange the standard good morning look, part recognition, part shared misery, and part did you sleep? Or were you just lying down regretting your enlistment choices? No one talks yet. Talking is a luxury for after breakfast and before screaming. There's a commander stomping down the line, his breath fogging the air like a smoke signal of disdain. He checks faces, mats, teeth. Yes, teeth. You're not sure why either, but it's probably just one more way to assert dominance. You smile. He frowns. You're off to a great start. And just as your stomach starts grumbling in protest, a horn sounds, signaling breakfast. You'd be excited if that horn didn't also signal things like enemy movement, fire drills, and occasionally, oops, we forgot to cook. But at least you're alive. Cold, tired, splintered, but alive. For now, you don't awaken so much as you unfold slowly, painfully from a human knot tied in the cold. You've spent the night on a coarse mat stuffed with millet husk, and the garrison walls do nothing to block the wind that hisses through the cracks like a nosy neighbor. Your breath fogs in front of you. It's not yet dawn, but your shift is already late. The penalty for tardiness is public flogging, or worse, scrubbing the latrines without gloves. Again, your sleeping quarters are generous by frontier standards, a shared barracks with 13 other men, and a rat who's claimed squatters' rights in the rice jar. There's a fire pit in the middle of the room, but no one had the energy to keep it burning through the night. Everyone wakes up cold, creaky, and vaguely furious at the existence of mornings. You change well. No, you rearrange your one uniform. You haven't washed it in weeks. Mostly because the nearest clean water is 2 kilometers away and reserved for people with actual rank. Your tunic itches like it was woven from regrets and camel hair. You cinch your belt. tucking in the ceremonial knife you're technically supposed to polish every day but haven't touched in months. It's mostly decorative. You, unfortunately, are not. Breakfast is a bowl of millet gruel, the culinary equivalent of giving up. It's lukewarm, mildly sour, and has the texture of wet parchment. There's a single pickled radish on the side your weekly ration. You stare at it with the reverence of someone who might name it and write poetry in its honor. Historians still argue whether low-rank soldiers in the Han frontier had access to such luxuries, or whether this was a bribe from a superior officer who felt mildly bad for yesterday's punishment parade. After this feast of beige, you check your gear bow with 3 arrows, 1 chipped, sword with a cracked hilt, and a wicker helmet that wouldn't stop a sneeze. The armory keeps promising better equipment, but somehow the shipment always gets delayed by bandits. It's a running joke bandits are blamed for everything. Bad weather bandits, lost boots, bandits, the commanding officer's missing wine jug, legendary bandits, clearly. You step outside into the yard and the day slaps you awake with freezing wind. The garrison bell rings, summoning everyone for the morning inspection. Captain Liu circles the line with his hands clasped behind his back like a man about to critique pottery. He's 30, looks 50, and has the resting face of a disappointed librarian. His eyes flick to your sword, your boots, your posture. You straighten instinctively, trying not to look as tired as you feel. You pass. Barely. Someone else isn't so lucky his belt is twisted, and he earns a backhand slap and an extra turn at wall duty. You don't flinch. You're used to it. This is the Han frontier, no war, no peace. Just a parade of little humiliations dressed up in iron discipline. Now comes the scroll reading edicts from the Emperor himself, read aloud by an officer who may or may not be literate. You try to focus, but the wind whistles louder than his voice, and your stomach is busy negotiating a ceasefire with your intestines. Something about crop quotas, something about respecting harmony. Mostly, it's code for don't cause trouble. And then, finally, the words you've been waiting for assigned duties. Today, you get watchtower duty. 6 hours of standing still while your feet turn to bricks and your bladder files for emancipation. Still, it's better than latrine patrol or rat chasing. You salute, grab your bow, and start the climb. Congratulations. You've made it to sunrise without being demoted, berated, or bitten. Truly, a miracle. Climbing the watchtower is the closest you'll get to cardio today, unless you count the full-body shiver that kicks in whenever the wind slaps you in the kidneys. The stairs creak with ancient resentment, each step groaning like it resents your weight specifically. When you reach the top, you're greeted by a view that can best be described as brown. Brown hills, brown dirt, brown wooden walls like the entire world forgot about color and settled on earthy sadness instead. But you're not here for scenery. You're here to spot potential threats, roving bandits, runaway horses, or disgruntled tax collectors who've decided to go rogue. Spoiler, you rarely spot anything. The frontier is about as lively as a library after curfew. You settle into your post, clutching your bow like it might warm your fingers through sheer proximity. Watch duty is a masterclass in boredom. You alternate between staring at nothing and pretending to stare at something, so your commanding officer won't accuse you of mental drifting. One time, a guy nodded off and claimed he was meditating on the Tao. It didn't work. He's still cleaning latrines 3 weeks later. To stay awake, you play games with yourself. Count the clouds, rank the birds, invent backstories for the guards on the opposite tower. That one with the crooked helmet secret poet. The one who never blinks, probably dead inside. You, meanwhile, develop a passionate grudge against a squirrel that's been taunting you from the same tree for days. It knows. Eventually, another guard trudges up the stairs, carrying a clay mug that allegedly contains tea. You swap shifts, take the mug, and sip. It's mostly warm water with 2 tea leaves floating like survivors of a shipwreck. Still, it's liquid, and therefore a luxury. You nod in thanks and descend. Next assignment, wall inspection. This involves walking the perimeter and poking wooden slats with a stick to see if anything wobbles. It's the sort of job that makes you question your life choices. Once, a board gave way and a soldier fell into a drainage ditch. He was fine physically, spiritually. He never recovered. You spot a gap near the west gate and report it to your superior. He nods solemnly, writes it on a bamboo slip, and tucks it behind his ear. You're not sure if that means he'll fix it or feed it to a goat later. Historians still argue whether frontier officers were actually competent or just very confident at pretending to be. Lunchtime rolls around, heralded by the clanging of a bell and the collective sigh of the half-starved. You join the queue at the mess hall, a building that smells faintly of cabbage, mold, and regret. The cook, a man named Bao who claims he once cooked for the imperial palace he didn't, ladles out steaming bowls of something. It's grey. It's thick. It jiggles when disturbed. Stew, he announces. Without elaboration, you don't ask questions. You sit on a crate, hunch over your bowl, and eat with the resigned efficiency of someone who's tasted worse. You find a chicken bone. Jackpot. You finish. Wipe your mouth on your sleeve, which is also your napkin, your scarf, and sometimes your pillow, and return the bowl. The cook glares at you like you've insulted his ancestors. You bow. It's unclear whether that's respect or self-defense. The rest of the afternoon is patrol duty, walking laps around the garrison wall with a partner who talks non-stop about fishing, even though you're 500 miles from a proper river. You nod politely, say "ah" at intervals, and quietly hope he forgets your name so he stops including you in hypothetical fishing trips. As the sun sets, your shift ends. You return to the barracks, where your rat roommate has brought friends. You lie on your mat, stare at the ceiling, and wonder how many more years of this you have left. The good news, you're alive. The bad news, so is your shift tomorrow. The garrison doesn't sleep. It just powers down into low-effort misery. Unfortunately, your turn on night guard comes sooner than you'd like. You're roused from your mat by a boot gently nudging your ribs, a considerate upgrade. From the usual yelling, outside, the air is brisk and smells faintly of pine smoke and latrine wind. You shiver into your cloak and strap on your gear. You trudge to your post near the outer fence, a jagged wall of sharpened logs lashed together with optimism and rope. Your weapon of choice, a halberd that weighs roughly as much as your regrets. The edge is so dull, it could legally qualify as a stick. Still, you sling it over your shoulder and try to look alert. Night watch isn't glamorous. It's 6 hours of squinting into the dark and pretending to know the difference between rustling grass and imminent attack. Most nights are uneventful, others less so. Last week, 2 wolves tried to make off with a sack of dried turnips. It was the most action the garrison had seen in months. Historians still argue whether those wolves were unusually bold or just bored senseless like the rest of you. Tonight, there's fog, the thick kind, where even your outstretched hand looks like it's fading into another dimension. You grip your halberd tighter, comforted by the fact that at least your enemies won't see you either until they're close enough to bite. You're paired with Liu, who has mastered the ancient military art of falling asleep standing up. Every few minutes, he startles awake and mumbles something about ghosts or dumplings, then nods off again. You envy his skill deeply. To stay sane, you compose haiku in your head. Cold fog surrounds me. My feet have become ice blocks. Rats sleep more than me. Your stomach rumbles. Midnight snack. That's funny. The last time someone tried sneaking extra food at night, they were caught chewing a stale rice cake under their blanket. Punishment cleaning latrines with a rag tied to a stick. Somehow, the rag made it worse. You begin to hallucinate vague shapes in the mist shadows that twitch, noises that might be foxes or figments. Then a shout. Real this time. You and Liu snap to attention, Liu more slowly, and rush toward the sound. It's a sentry at the southern gate. He points into the darkness, yelling about a figure near the tree line. You all squint like confused pigeons. Nothing. You fan out cautiously, halberds at the ready, feet crunching frost-crusted grass. And then you see it, a person-shaped blur disappearing behind a rock. You chase. Your lungs burn, your feet slip, your halberd nearly flattens a bush. But by the time you round the rock, nothing. Just fog and your own wheezing breath. The others arrive behind you, equally empty-handed. Bandit scout, someone mutters, drunk shepherd. Another counters. Historians still argue whether garrison outposts actually faced constant threats, or whether most intrusions were just figments of overworked, underfed soldiers desperately needing excitement. Either way, the commander is notified. You return to your post, pulse still thudding in your ears. The adrenaline wears off quickly, replaced by exhaustion and the creeping suspicion that you may have imagined the whole thing. Fog has a way of turning imagination into reality. And back again. The sun rises slowly, revealing nothing out of place. No bandits, no tracks, just the same muddy footprints and frost-slicked walls. You hand off your halberd to the next guard and shuffle back to the barracks. Sleep claims you before your head even hits the mat. It smells faintly of damp wool and someone else's dreams. You wake up to a faint ache in your lower back and a louder ache in your pride. Your glorious life as a Han Dynasty frontier soldier continues this time with latrine duty. Congratulations. Apparently, running through fog chasing imaginary invaders wasn't heroic enough to get you out of waste management. The latrines are a short walk from the barracks, if by short, you mean far enough to regret every life choice. They're located downwind mercifully, but also downhill, which becomes a thrilling mudslide during rainy seasons. Today the path is dry, which is great, because it means all the smells are crisp and concentrated. Latrines in your garrison are rudimentary, wooden platforms with open pits beneath. There are no walls, no privacy, just you, the elements, and several comrades bonding over shared discomfort. Toilets are less a place of relief and more a slow social experiment. If you've ever wanted to hold eye contact while someone uses a bucket with a hole in it, this is your moment. And don't ask about toilet paper. You use leaves, or sticks, or bits of leftover parchment from broken supply crates. One soldier once used the edge of his sleeve in desperation. It did not end well. Historians still debate whether fabric hygiene methods were invented before or after the outbreak of several mysterious rashes. Your job this morning is to stir the pit. Yes, that's a real task. Using a long wooden pole, let's call it the staff of displeasure. You agitate the contents so they settle more evenly, and honestly, does it matter? It's a pit of collective shame. Nothing you do improves it. But orders are orders. Next, you scatter ash over the top, not for sanitation, just to slightly dampen the scent. It doesn't work. The smell is like burnt garlic and broken dreams. One soldier vomits every time. You've learned to breathe through your mouth and think about literally anything else. Like whether ghosts can smell. After cleanup, you're allowed to return and wash up at the communal trough. Washing is optional, depending on whether there's water left in the barrel. Today, you're in luck. A few cold, muddy scoops and your hands feel less cursed. You dry them on your shirt, which is also your sleeping shirt, and eating shirt, and only shirt. You grab your daily ration, a small lump of millet rice, boiled into submission. There's a sprinkle of fermented soybean paste, if you're lucky. You're not lucky. The rice is chewy, somehow both sticky and dry. It tastes like wet parchment. You chew anyway. Hunger doesn't care about texture. Nearby, two soldiers argue about whether bandits are scarier than the northern barbarians. You chime in with a third option, the garrison cook. Everyone nods grimly. The cook once served turnip soup that was just hot water with a turnip staring from the bottom, like it regretted everything. As you eat, you feel a light breeze welcome relief from the latrine air and look out at the empty horizon. Somewhere out there, real danger may lurk. But here in the garrison, the danger is mostly boredom, sanitation failure, and whatever's growing in Liu's boots. Still, you made it through latrine duty without vomiting or crying. That's a victory. You may not be the strongest soldier here, but today you're the cleanest. Relatively. Drills begin again at midday, which is the universe's way of reminding you that muscles can ache in places you didn't know you had. You line up with the other soldiers in formation, back straight, knees bent slightly, spear vertical, expression somewhere between intense and constipated. The sun scorches overhead. Your straw hat offers about as much protection as a thin apology. Sweat trickles down your neck, into your collar, and directly into your soul. You'd kill for a breeze. Instead, you get barked commands from Sergeant Borevoice, whose tone makes every sentence sound like an insult even stand still. The drill is simple in theory block. Thrust, step back. In practice, your arms feel like wet noodles, and your wooden spear has a splinter that found a very personal place in your palm. Your hands are blistered, your shoulder twitches involuntarily, and you're fairly certain your right foot has staged a silent protest. Training is relentless. You're told that the Xiongnu enemy could attack any time. Except, historically, they haven't for months. Historians still argue whether these drills were designed for readiness or to prevent soldiers from losing their minds to boredom. Because nothing fuels paranoia like too much free time and not enough food. One drill involves crawling on your belly through gravel to simulate evasion. You suspect it's just to simulate pain. Tiny rocks wedge into your elbows and knees. The gravel smells faintly of something burnt. Probably ambition. After crawling comes wall climbing. There's a makeshift barricade that pretends to be a fortress. It's made of stacked logs and indifference. You run, jump, miss the top by an inch, and slide down with all the grace of a sack of wet laundry. Your comrade Ping manages to make it up. You hate him now. Lunch is served late. Millet cake. Again. It's dry, crumbly, and somehow manages to suck all moisture from your mouth before dissolving into what you can only describe as edible dust. There's a debate over whether chewing or just swallowing it whole is better. One soldier sprinkles water on his to make a paste. You don't have that luxury. You eat, you cough, you regret. After lunch, the officer assigns you to wall watch, the highlight of your day. Truly. You climb the ladder to the sentry tower. From up here, the horizon looks exactly the same as yesterday flat plains. Dry wind, distant trees that never seem to move closer. The only excitement is spotting a lizard. You name it Commander Tailwig and salute. It disappears under a rock, honestly. It's probably a better soldier than most of you. You're expected to rotate shifts with another watchman, but he's napping under the shade of the archery platform. You consider waking him. You decide against it. Solidarity. Sometimes, merchants pass the outpost camel caravans carrying silk, spices or letters from cities far away. You stare at them like they're mirages. They don't stop. You wouldn't either. Evening drills involve archery. Your bowstring is frayed, your arrows warped. You aim, loose, and miss the target by a generous distance. Sergeant Boar voice grunts in your direction. You nod solemnly, as if this was a strategic warning shot. No one believes you. The day winds down. You stretch your sore limbs and pat down the dust. You haven't bathed in days. You smell like old leather and anxiety, but you're still standing, somehow. And tomorrow you'll do it all over again, maybe with less gravel in your undergarments. But no promises. You wake the next morning to the sound of gongs again. Not the elegant chime of ritual, but the hammer-to-metal clang that says, "Get up or get flogged." Your legs scream. Your back has redefined the word stiff. And your fingers permanently curled around the shape of yesterday's spear. Today, you're assigned to dig trenches, which sounds like a break from combat training until you realize that digging in sun-baked earth with a wooden spade is just an elaborate way to beg for heat stroke. You hack at the dirt like it insulted your family. It barely notices. Each trench is supposed to help drain rainwater and defend against surprise attacks, which is ironic because it hasn't rained in weeks and the closest enemy is probably also dehydrated and sick of dirt. Historians still argue whether frontier trench systems were military necessities or just exercises in creative punishment. A fellow soldier beside you, Jun, keeps humming. You ask what the song is. He says it's about tofu. You decide not to question it. Anything to distract from the blisters forming on your palms. You try not to think about how many layers of skin you've lost since arriving. Once the trench is deep enough to hide your shame, you're sent to fill water buckets. The well is down a hill, past the latrine zone where air quality becomes a suggestion. The bucket's handle bites into your hand. The water sloshes. You lose half before you return. No one complains. It's a miracle you brought any back. At midday, you're volunteered for patrol duty beyond the outpost walls. This sounds exciting. It is not. You walk slowly through the dry scrublands, eyes peeled for bandits or wild animals. What you actually find are rocks, and one suspiciously shaped bush that turns out to be just a bush. There's no shade. You wrap your head in cloth to avoid burning. You've now worn the same outfit for 3 weeks. It smells like disappointment and mildew. The coarse linen tunic rubs your underarms raw. You try adjusting it. It laughs at you. In the afternoon, the garrison is ordered to clean the armory, which is located in a stone building that, by noon, is roughly the temperature of freshly baked pottery. You scrub rust off halberds. You polish arrowheads. You sort spear shafts by length and straightness. And you begin to hallucinate that one of the swords is whispering insults. Someone drops a helmet. It lands with a clang and cracks at the rim. You all freeze. The officer looks. The soldier mutters an apology and offers to fix it. The officer tells him to wear it instead for the next 3 days as punishment. He nods solemnly. You suspect it's not the worst punishment he's had. Before dinner, there's time for calligraphy practice, yes. Calligraphy. Because even garrison life insists you be both warrior and scholar. You dip a brittle brush into ink and attempt to copy poems about peace and lotus blossoms. Your handwriting resembles terrified ants. You try to hide your paper. Jun sees it, says beautiful. You're unsure if he's sincere or deeply sarcastic. You nod anyway. Dinner is better than usual, which means it's lukewarm cabbage soup with real salt, and dumplings with something inside. You don't ask. You chew. You survive. The sky darkens, the wind picks up, and the command is shouted, "Prepare for night drills." You scream inside. You limp out under moonlight, clutching a practice spear, half awake and 100% resentful. Night drills are not optional. They're designed to simulate enemy ambush scenarios, which really means keep you from sleeping enough to think straight. You shuffle into line, armor half fastened, feet still sore from yesterday's trench-digging extravaganza. Your commanding officer bellows something inspirational like, "If the Xiongnu come at night, you'll die tired." Motivating, uplifting, a war cry for sleep-deprived morale. Tonight's drill involves running through sand in full gear, dodging fake arrows, and crawling under horizontal poles while being shouted at. You briefly consider rolling into the bushes and pretending to be a deer. But you're wearing bronze-plated shin guards. And deer famously don't jingle. Your group charges across the training ground. Someone trips, sending a wave of falling bodies like dominoes. You end up with a sandal in your face and a bruised hip. Historians still argue whether these drills genuinely prepared soldiers or just increased the odds of sprained ankles. The best part after the drills, there's maintenance. Because nothing says restful night like checking your weapon for rust at midnight. You squat by a torchlit bench, rubbing oil into your blade and wondering if this is character building or character erasing. Then clouds roll in. The temperature drops. A Han frontier night isn't cool, it's atmospheric revenge. The wind whips through the wall cracks, your cloak flaps like a tattered flag. You huddle by a dying fire, holding a clay mug of barley tea that's mostly warm water with mood. Another soldier beside you, Chen, starts talking about his dream. To open a tea shop when he retires. He's 19. He's already got grey hair. You nod along. You're not sure if the tea shop is a fantasy or a symptom of heat stroke. Eventually, someone plays a flute badly. It sounds like a goose caught in a net, but it's strangely soothing. You lean back, watching the smoke curl into the sky, trying to pretend the stars are inspiring and not just reminders of how far from home you are. You sleep where you sit, head drooping, cloak tucked around your shoulders. Your dreams involve bamboo traps, bad poetry, and one very angry goat. At dawn, the gong again. Surprise, a dust storm is approaching. Orders are barked to reinforce the outer walls. You wrap cloth around your mouth and climb the ramparts with a sack of sandbags. The wind screams, dust slices your face. Visibility drops to almost nothing. You can't tell if you're fortifying the wall or just throwing sandbags into the void. A rock hits your ankle. A bird flies overhead, panicked. You wonder if even the birds have second thoughts about being born here. You manage to hold the line against the wind, against gravity, against your own body's demands for rest. Your legs wobble, your eyes burn, your knuckles are cracked, and your sinuses are now 80% gravel. Afterward, the garrison commander praises the unit. No one died. Good job, that's the bar. Just not dying, you return to your quarters, which smell like dried sweat and bamboo mold. Someone's snoring. Someone else is mumbling about ghosts. You collapse onto your cot. The wind still howls outside. Inside, your heart rate slows. You made it through the storm. Just don't ask about tomorrow. At sunrise, the trumpet sounds again melodic. Yes, but about as welcome as a slap to the face. You peel yourself off the cot like old rice off a cooking pot. Your limbs ache in new places. Apparently, the dust storm has passed. The sun is out. Good news, your lungs are now dry. Bad news, so is the only water barrel. You're summoned for ration duty. This means guarding a cart filled with half-rotten turnips and dried grain that tastes like regret. Your job, make sure none of the troops take more than their assigned scoop. Because nothing builds camaraderie like starvation policing. A soldier named Bao tries to sneak an extra turnip. You pretend not to see it. He's lost 2 toenails and hasn't stopped coughing for a week. He needs it more than the rule book does. After the shift, it's time to wash, sort of. There's a shared bucket of tepid water, grey from previous use. You dip your hands in and wipe your face with a rag that's seen too many cheeks. The good news, no one expects you to smell good. The bad news, the flies still visit you anyway. Then comes patrol duty. You walk the perimeter of the fort, muddy ground, sun beating down, helmet sliding over sweat-soaked hair. One of your fellow guards tells a story about a haunted tree in a nearby forest. You nod, half interested, half sunburned. Historians still debate whether Han soldiers genuinely believed in tree spirits or just needed something to blame for the smell of latrines. You spot something on the horizon, just a dust swirl, maybe a deer. But the anxiety clings. This place doesn't let you relax, even when you're bored. You're never calm. Later, you help bury another soldier's boots. Not the soldier he just deserted. Left a note. Tell my goat, I'm sorry. You all agree he's probably happier now, even if he's wolf food. Back at camp, someone's baking a rice cake. It smells like actual food. You get a slice the size of your thumb. It's the highlight of your week. You think about writing home. But parchment is scarce, so you talk to the wind instead, whispering updates into the breeze like a homesick child, pretending it carries words eastward. As night falls, a commander gives a pep talk. You are the shield of the Empire. You smile, dryly, mostly. You're a sponge absorbing heat, dust, and disappointment. You sleep in a half-upright position because your back still hurts from the last spear practice. The stars glitter overhead, utterly unbothered by your existence. The garrison is silent now, save for the rustling reeds, the low groan of timber walls, and someone mumbling in dreams, probably about goats again. Tomorrow, you'll clean weapons, reinforce walls, spar in the heat, and maybe, just maybe, dream of retirement, or at least indoor plumbing. But for now, you let your muscles slacken. The pain dulls, your breathing slows, your mind floats like driftwood down a lazy stream. You survived another day on the frontier. You earned this sleep. Word count 595. Wind down, and now everything softens. The sounds of swords and storms fade gently into memory. The dust on your skin settles. The ache in your shoulders, the clamor of duty, the weight of the Empire all drift away with each breath. You're no longer a sentinel staring across miles of wilderness. You're just a heartbeat in the dark, safe for a moment beneath distant stars. Let your mind grow quiet. Let your limbs grow still. There are no drills now, no orders to follow, no spears to clean. Just the whisper of wind across sand, the creak of timber, and the hush of sleep drawing near. You made it, you endured, and now you rest. Sleep well. Soldier, now. We wake up in a Mongolian steppe tent. Technically a gur, but it's more like a smoky igloo made of wool and whatever the goats weren't using. Your eyelids flutter open. It's still dark outside, because the sun takes its sweet time rising over this frost-bitten landscape. The air inside the yurt is thick with the scent of scorched mutton fat and wet felt, like someone tried to cook a sweater and lost control halfway. You're breathing in smoke from the stove, but don't worry, it's only mildly toxic. Your bedding situation is as glamorous as advertised: a mat of flattened grass, stiff wool blankets, and a hard lesson in spinal misalignment. The fire has gone out. Of course, your boots, which you left too close to the door, are frozen solid actual bricks of leather. You do that thing where you slam them against the floor to soften them up, and they respond by mocking your weakness. You're 23, but your joints think you're 75. A goat is standing 2 feet from your face, staring at you like you owe it money. You try not to inhale through your nose. This is your new normal. You are a low-ranking nobody in Genghis Khan's sprawling mobile empire. You're not rich enough to sleep near the fire. You're not skilled enough to command respect. But you're just important enough to be yelled at a lot and sent out to fight bandits or worse, fetch things in the snow. And you would never think that the worst part of this morning wouldn't be the frostbite creeping up your ankle, but the knowledge that breakfast is coming soon. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments what's your local time. And where are you listening from now? Dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You sit up. Your hair feels sticky. Is that yak grease, probably? The fire's out, and the elder in your unit is muttering something about hurry before the horses freeze again. You nod, because words are too expensive to use this early. You stretch, and your back cracks so loudly the goat leaves in fear. There's your victory for the day. Out you go, hauling from the yurt into the morning cold like a stunned raccoon. The wind hits you like a slap made of ice shards. You blink hard and feel your eyelashes trying to stick together. The sky is flat and grey. The ground is solid and unfeeling. Welcome to Genghis Khan's Mongolia, where everything wants to kill you. And your socks have already given up. Historians still argue whether life in a ger was more cozy than tragic. But you're pretty sure the answer is yes. And it smells like wet wool. You trudge toward the livestock pens, because nothing says elite imperial destiny like shoveling frozen horse dung. The camp is already alive, by which we mean people are moving around in a zombie-like state while groaning into the wind. There's a brief, sacred moment where everyone stares at each other without saying anything, unified by the shared knowledge that none of you slept well, and all of you are about to make terrible life choices involving raw meat and fermented milk. First task of the day, water. Which is ironic, because the water is in solid denial of its liquid identity right now. You and another unfortunate soul grab the yoke, yes. The actual wooden beam across the shoulders, like you're auditioning for a rice farming documentary and hike off to the river. The buckets knock against your knees and threaten to twist your spine into a Mobius strip. The river is a half-mile away, and it's less a river than a suspiciously grey ribbon frozen in place. You spend the next 20 minutes breaking through the ice with a metal spike, so dull it might as well be made of salted cracker. By the time the water is secured, your hands are so numb they feel imaginary. Historians still argue whether this routine was meant to toughen young warriors or simply weed out the weak via hypothermia. Either way, you're not winning. Back at camp, you're handed breakfast, Irag, the world's least charming smoothie, made from fermented mare's milk. It smells like disappointment and tastes like regret with a yogurt aftertaste. On good days, it's only mildly alcoholic. On bad days, it might still be fermenting in your mouth. With that comes a fist-sized ball of Bortsog deep-fried dough that's either hard as jade or covered in dust. Depending on the chef's current life crisis, you chew, you regret chewing. Your superior barks something at you in Mongol. You catch the word for horses, which can only mean one thing: you're off to help saddle them. The horses are not normal. They're small, scrappy, and filled with the kind of rage only short horses can contain. They bite, kick, and refuse to be impressed by your human nonsense. They know you're not important. They can smell your poverty. As you approach, one of them farts in your direction and stares directly into your soul. You mutter a curse that's probably been uttered in 12 languages across history. The horse wins this round, as usual. Fun fringe fact: Mongol horses can survive on frozen grass and almost no water. You,
However, need 3 layers of fur and still can't feel your kneecaps. You manage to saddle one horse, tie down a second, and help haul a cart into alignment. Your fingers have frost inside them now. That's not a joke. You look at your knuckles and wonder if they've fossilized. By the time the sun finally crests the horizon, more of a reluctant yawn than a proper sunrise, you've already been awake for 3 hours. And you've accomplished roughly nothing. But you're not dead, yet. After that invigorating morning of livestock, frozen river water, and mild dairy poisoning, it's time to experience another thrill camp discipline. You know what keeps a mobile empire from turning into a traveling circus? Not that it feels especially organized. It's more angry men with whips and flags than any structured system of meritocracy. But hey, at least the flags are colorful. You're summoned with a grunt, because names are a luxury and you're currently the short one who spilled soup yesterday. The day's instructions are barked out by your unit commander, who seems to have only 2 settings: bellow and spit. Your task: spear drills, formation practice. And if the gods are feeling spicy, maybe a full horseback mock charge before lunch. You'd complain, but the last guy who muttered anything was politely escorted out of camp by 2 very large men and never mentioned again. Historians still argue whether that policy was formal exile or a quiet execution. Either way, morale is great. You and 20 other low-ranking grunts march to the open plain outside the guerriere camp, where the wind is free to slap your face from every direction. The drills begin. Forward thrust, side sweep, retreat step, again, again, again. Every now and then, someone collapses from exhaustion or faints mid-spin, and the instructor's only response is to point at them and yell wrong. This, you suspect, is how Genghis Khan bred champions through rigorous instruction and 0 sympathy. Eventually, the lesson pivots to horseback spear work. This is the part where you try not to die. Your horse, once again, knows you are weak. It bucks as you mount, possibly for sport, possibly just to see if your soul will leave your body. You hang on. Barely. And then the mock charge. You and your companions line up. You lower your spear. The commander shouts something inspirational, probably. It sounds more like a death threat. You charge. It's like a stampede, but with slightly more structure and slightly less dignity. Your horse stumbles, rights itself, and charges anyway. You scream internally, outwardly. You look like a hero. A cold, terrified hero with windburn on your gums. Afterwards, you're allowed to rest, by which they mean stand in place and not fall over. A grizzled old warrior named Beck shuffles over. He's missing 3 fingers, walks with a limp, and still somehow outperforms you. He gives you a boiled sheep bone to gnaw on. This is, apparently, a reward. You pretend to appreciate it, even as your teeth rattle. One quirky historical tidbit: elite soldiers sometimes softened calluses by rubbing them with sheep tallow. You, however, just bleed quietly into your gloves and hope the day ends. You return to camp, aching in places you didn't know had nerves. Your fingers blister, your thighs burn, your ego gone. You're beginning to suspect your only real weapon is spite. Still, you're a part of the machine now. A very small, slightly bruised gear in the war engine of the largest contiguous empire in history. And tomorrow, you'll do it all again. You wake up the next day with the grace of a dropped sack of potatoes. Every joint complains. Your legs stage a small rebellion. And your back, it's begun writing angry letters to the rest of your body, demanding immediate relocation to a more civilized era, preferably one with mattresses. But before you can even stretch, the breakfast bell clinks. And by bell, we mean a large man banging a metal pot with the emotional range of a thunderstorm. You drag yourself upright, wondering if you're actually still alive or just haunting your own body. Now, we talk food. Mongol cuisine in the age of Genghis Khan is efficient. The good news, it's warm. The bad news, it's mostly fermented. That's right. Breakfast today is air-dried curd, known as arul. It's rock-hard dairy that was probably abandoned by milk itself. You gnaw on it like a nervous beaver, hoping it won't chip a tooth. Spoiler, it will. To wash it down, there's Arag fermented mare's milk. It fizzes, it tangs, it fights back. And it's technically nutritious, assuming you survive the aftertaste. Historians still argue whether the Mongols actually enjoyed this or just feared dehydration more. And then there's soup. Always soup. Mutton broth boiled to the point where even the bones give up and dissolve slightly. It's the kind of meal that hugs your stomach and simultaneously questions your life choices. Midway through breakfast, a brawl breaks out over a piece of dried meat. No one dies, but several egos are permanently injured. The meat, ironically, is stepped on and discarded. You consider salvaging it. You don't. One of your campmates, a wiry youth named Urk, offers you a piece of bortsog, a fried dough snack that tastes like someone whispered sugar into a biscuit. It's the closest thing to dessert you've had since joining. You nearly cry. Lunch isn't much different. More mutton, more curd. Occasionally, wild onions or dried turnips show up, but they never stay long. Fresh vegetables are a fairy tale, and fruits are for nobility or hallucinations. You chew slowly, pretending every bite is part of some ancient warrior tradition, rather than just what was left in the cart. You learn to adapt, swallow quickly, chew strategically. Never take the last portion unless you're prepared to fight for it. And always sniff before sipping anything white. Could be milk, could be foot wash. Nobody checks. Dinner is communal, and by now your group has sorted out its hierarchy. You, unfortunately, are still at the bottom, which means bones, not meat. On the plus side, you've learned how to suck marrow like a true survivor. That's a skill they don't teach in school. One strange thing you notice, the senior warriors hum while eating. It's not a tune. It's more like a low vibration. Urk says it's to scare off bad spirits. You suspect it's to drown out the flavor. The evening ends with a shared jug of very questionable Iraq, passed around like a sacred relic. You take a swig. It tastes like commitment. Regret follows. As you lie down to sleep, stomach half full and spirit 3/4 broken, you reflect on your progress. You didn't vomit in front of anyone today. Victory. You wake up stiff, dusty, and just the right amount of confused to forget that you fell asleep next to a horse's rear end. Again. At some point during the night, the fire went out and the steppe wind snuck in along with several beetles, one of which now claims your left boot as a summer home. Now, we turn to the glamorous world of hygiene in Genghis Khan's empire. Spoiler, it doesn't exist, at least not in the sense that your 21st century body would recognize or accept without protest. You start your morning wash with a handful of dust. That's not an insult, it's a literal method. Mongols believed that bathing in water, especially warm water, weakened the body and opened it to illness. Which is ironic, because historians still argue whether this belief saved them from waterborne diseases or just gave them really confident fleas. To clean your face, you might rub it with a woolen cloth or snow, if it's winter. Congratulations-free exfoliation. If it's summer, you'll be lucky to find anything cleaner than the sweat dripping off your neighbor's horse. You try anyway, and end up just shifting the dirt around your face until you look slightly more blended with the landscape. Toilets delightfully non-existent. You relieve yourself behind a rock, facing Mecca, or at least some random patch of sky, and pray the wind doesn't turn. Mongol camps had no designated latrines.
which makes you very aware of where you step, especially at night. Public sanitation was, let's say, interpretive. Teeth, you rub them with a twig or a horsehair brush. Or not at all, after all. Most Mongols believed chewing bones or drinking strong arag kept their teeth strong, which is scientifically bold and dentally tragic. Body odor, a badge of honor. Or, at least, nobody comments on it. You smell like everyone else: damp wool, fermented milk, campfire smoke, and tactical neglect. It's a scent that screams, "I'm surviving aggressively." You do hear rumors of ritual smoke cleansing. Warriors sometimes stand near a fire made of juniper or sheep dung to smoke off evil spirits and unwanted odors. You try this once. The spirits remain. So does the smell. Now you just smell like evil spirits on fire. Your hair, now a thicket of dust-dreaded ambition, gets no sympathy. There are no combs. You detangle with fingers and the occasional threat. Some warriors braid their hair with bits of leather or copper. You, lacking both resources and style, simply tie it back with a strip of linen that might have once been part of a saddle. Clothing gets no love either. You haven't changed in 5 days, not out of laziness, but because you own one tunic and a set of felt trousers. Laundry requires water, soap, and dignity, all of which are strictly theoretical concepts in this world. When it rains, you rejoice. Not because it brings life to the plains, but because it's your only real chance at a rinse. You strip half naked and stand there like a confused forest goblin, letting muddy droplets cascade down your goosebumped skin. It is glorious and terrible. And then you slip and fall face first into a pile of horse dung. Dignity restored to zero. Personal hygiene in Mongol society, it turns out, isn't about being clean. It's about not dying of exposure, frostbite, or ridicule. And somehow, despite your grime-layered shell, you begin to feel strangely at home in it. As the sun climbs, so does the weight of your daily duties. Only your duties don't involve spreadsheets or deadlines. No, your tasks involve saddles, livestock, and the terrifying knowledge that today's biggest challenge might be a goat, or your commander's temper, or a surprise skirmish because someone overcooked the mutton again. You start with the horses. Mongol horses are famously hardy, small, muscular, and powered almost exclusively by rage and grass. These creatures have no interest in being your friend. You approach your assigned mount with what can only be described as nervous optimism. You whisper reassurances. It spits in your direction. Good morning. Tending to the horses means brushing, feeding, checking hooves, and occasionally massaging their backs with your forehead when they suddenly decide to buck. Mongol culture practically worships the horse your life. Travel, and even warfare depend on it. You don't just ride a horse. You become its deeply unqualified co-pilot. Once the animals are managed, it's time for weapons training. Your bow is short, compact, and designed for use on horseback. Pulling it to full draw is like trying to unbend time. Your instructor yells, you squint, you fire. The arrow lands 3 meters away, buried halfway into a pile of manure. You nod like this was intentional. Then comes wrestling practice. Mongol wrestling, or bok, is less about finesse and more about aggressively hugging someone until gravity helps you win. You are thrown within 6 seconds. The air exits your lungs and possibly your will to live. The victor pats you on the shoulder and offers you fermented milk as a consolation prize. You accept. You regret. Lunch is boiled meat. Again, goat. Probably. Or sheep. Could be yesterday's horse. If things went sideways, it's served with hard, dry bread that doubles as a projectile weapon in emergencies. You chew thoughtfully. You consider whether food in modern prisons might actually be more diverse.
The rest of your afternoon is a cocktail of chores and drills. You're ordered to inspect armor lamella plates strung together with rawhide. Your job: patch cracks, tighten cords, and try not to cut yourself. You fail once. You bleed a little. A nearby warrior looks up, shrugs and says, "Blood feeds courage." You wonder if bandages also feed tetanus. You're then given the honor of cleaning weapons. Daggers, swords, arrowheads each coated in layers of dried mud, sweat, and history. You scrub with sand and water from a half-frozen stream. It feels like polishing regrets. Still, the real work isn't the labor, it's the discipline. Mongol military life runs on strict hierarchy and even stricter silence. Orders are obeyed, not discussed. Mistakes are corrected with barked commands or silent judgment. Your superior, who has 3 teeth and 0 patience, watches your every move like a hawk with commitment issues. Historians still argue whether the brutal training regime was rooted in necessity or cruelty. You, personally, suspect it's a bit of both. After all, only a society constantly at war would look at back-breaking drills and say, "This builds character." By nightfall, you can no longer feel your arms or your ego. But you did survive. You didn't fall off your horse again. You didn't get stabbed accidentally during spear practice. And you only mildly insulted the cook by asking what animal the stew used to be. You crawl back to your tent, skin sticky with sweat and dust, ribs sore from wrestling and life choices. You stare at a roof and wonder, is this what strength feels like? Or is it just what happens when pain becomes routine? The night offers no rest. Mongol sleep is not about comfort, it's about survival. You lie on a felt mat inside your ger, surrounded by 20 other snoring comrades and the thick, moist aroma of leather, sweat, and what might be boiled intestines from last Tuesday. The silence is broken only by occasional snorts, creaking armor, and your own internal monologue begging for unconsciousness. At some unknown hour, possibly 2 minutes after you finally doze off, you are awakened by a trumpet blast. You spring up, smack your head on the low support pole, and stagger outside. It's a drill, or an ambush, or a practical joke by a sadistic officer who finds sleep morally suspicious. Today's mission patrol duty along the frontier. Now, we haven't discussed the frontier yet. Have we? It's where civilization meets chaos. A windswept no man's land, dotted with lonely watch posts, rocky outcrops, and the occasional band of extremely unfriendly strangers. You mount up, bow strapped to your back, and ride out into what feels like the last chapter of a survival guide you never finished reading. The wind slices through your clothes, which, spoiler alert, are not windproof. Your boots are felt. Your trousers are fur-lined, but in the sense that a moth-eaten carpet is insulated. Every gust finds a gap and takes liberties with your body temperature. Still, the horizon is vast and quiet. You ride for hours, scanning the hills for signs of movement. It's mostly sheep, but at one point there's a dust plume. You freeze. Everyone does. Bows are drawn, hearts pound, but it's just a camel caravan. Traders or spies. Or traders who might also be spies. Historians still argue whether the Mongols tolerated merchants out of economic pragmatism or because they made for useful informants. You continue on, stopping briefly to set up a lookout post. This means stacking stones, marking distances, and shouting at each other through the wind about who forgot to bring the signaling cloths again. You warm your hands with a dung-fueled fire. It smells like optimism dipped in regret. After a while, your group stumbles upon something more serious, an abandoned enemy camp. It's not large, but its recent, still warm ashes, hoofprints, and discarded scraps. You examine it like a detective with frostbite. This is why you're here. Not to fight, necessarily, but to know who might want to. Patrolling the frontier is less about glory and more about nerves. Every shape might be a rider. Every tree line might hide a scout. The paranoia is exhausting, the boredom worse. You whisper jokes under your breath just to prove you're still mentally intact. One guy makes finger puppets from goat leather. Another hums a battle song as a lullaby. Eventually, you stop for a meal, which, of course, means hard cheese and fermented mare's milk. Chewing the cheese is like gnawing on a brick of salty regret. The milk tastes like what happens when yogurt gives up on life. But you drink it anyway. Hunger is humbling. By sundown, you make it back to camp. No ambushes, no casualties. Just windburn and an entirely new appreciation for modern outerwear. You dismount, legs jelly-like from hours in the saddle, and wonder how anyone managed to conquer half the world on a diet of curds and adrenaline. Still, you didn't run, you didn't freeze. You didn't embarrass yourself more than usual. And in Mongol terms, that's a win. You sleep tonight with one eye open, not because you're afraid, but because it's genuinely hard to relax when your pillow is also your saddlebag.
The weather in the Mongol steppe is not just a feature of the landscape, it's a personality. A deeply unstable, wildly unpredictable, emotionally manipulative personality. One moment, it's gentle sunshine and the scent of thawed grass. The next, a snow squall so sudden it feels like a prank from a weather god with a grudge. You wake in the middle of the night to frost forming inside the Giyi. Yes, inside, your breath hangs in the air like a ghost of warmth that decided not to stick around. You wrap yourself tighter in your robe, but the cold is not impressed. It slinks in through seams, down your collar, and into your soul. And it's only spring. In summer, the steppe does a complete reversal. You bake. Your clothes, designed to retain heat, now trap it like a cruel joke. The felt layers cling to your body, soaking in sweat until you feel like a walking wool sponge. There's no shade, just the wide, mocking expanse of endless blue sky. You'd think someone would have invented a straw hat or a sun visor. But no, you squint into the distance, hoping your retinas don't fry before lunch. Rain doesn't fall politely. It arrives in sheets. Your boots fill with water in minutes. Mud clings to everything. The roads, if you can call them that, turn into pudding. Your horse is less thrilled about this than you are, which is saying something. And yet, Mongol warriors continue through all of it. Why? Because if they don't, someone from another tribe might show up and relieve them of their sheep, their pride, or their internal organs. Rain or shine, snow or sandstorm, the show must go on. There is no climate control. There is no break room. There is only the weather and your body, which is somehow both too cold and too sweaty. You try bathing. Once, a nearby river looks promising. You strip, dive in, and immediately regret every life decision that brought you to this point. It's less refreshing and more heart-stopping. The cold is a full-body slap that leaves your teeth protesting the very concept of cleanliness. You emerge a cleaner but emotionally scarred person. Bathing, as it turns out, is optional for most of the year. Soap is a concept from the future. Instead, you rub yourself with horse fat or a coarse cloth. This is less spa treatment and more greasy exfoliation under duress. Historians still argue whether Mongol hygiene was truly poor by medieval standards, or simply misunderstood through foreign eyes. Some sources suggest their practices were shockingly practical, cleaning wounds with alcohol, shaving heads to reduce lice. Others describe them as the aromatic nightmares of the Silk Road. You'd like to believe you're clean, but your nose, your comrades, and the flies all disagree. Even your clothing turns against you. The heavy deal, your long overcoat, sags under humidity. In winter, it freezes into something resembling a woolen coffin. Your boots stiffen into foot-shaped cages. You envy the horses, at least they get to roll in the dirt without judgment. There's no hiding from the weather. No inside to escape to unless you count a packed gear full of armored humans and one very judgmental goat. Still, the Mongols didn't conquer the known world by waiting for good weather. You hunch your shoulders, pull your hood low, and ride into whatever Mother Nature feels like throwing at you next, because surviving means adapting. Complaining helps too, but mostly adapting. You wake before dawn again, not because of any alarm clock, but because something warm and wet is on your cheek. It's a goat, inside the gur, and it's licking your face like it owns the place. You've lost the concept of personal space. Haven't you outside? The sky is a moody purple. The wind has shifted. Your joints know before you do that it's going to be a bad day. You creak out of your bedroll like an elderly marionette and step into your boots, still damp, still suspiciously crusty. Breakfast is a challenge. Not because it's complex, just the opposite. You gnaw on dried meat so tough it could double as building material. Then slurp down a bowl of fermented mare's milk. The taste is acquired by someone else. You haven't acquired it yet. But you drink anyway, because you need the calories. Life on the steppe is less about flavor and more about fuel. You'll need it. Today, you patrol the outer ring of camp. That means hours of slow riding, eyes peeled for signs of bandits, spies, or bored warriors with a grudge. No podcast, no shade, just you, your horse, and the occasional vulture circling overhead like a sentient to-do list. You pass an older guard, his face leathered by wind and wisdom. He nods. You nod back. No one speaks. Talking wastes breath, and besides, there's little to say that hasn't already been muttered under someone's hooded breath at 3 a.m. Later, you're assigned to cleaning latrine pits. Glamorous. The stench is almost a physical object. But you do it. Because if you don't, someone else might do it worse. Or throw you into it. Mongol justice is efficient, not delicate. Still, historians still argue whether this gritty, endlessly practical lifestyle was brutal or brilliant. The Empire's military success suggests one answer. Your aching back suggests another. Evenings are better. There's music sometimes, drums, two-stringed fiddles, throat singing that vibrates your bones. You sit by the fire, wrap your deal tighter, and let the warmth seep into your skin. Someone passes a flask. You don't ask what's in it, you just drink. And for a few minutes, you forget the lice, the saddle sores, and the goat who's claimed your pillow. But then the drums stop. A horn sounds in the distance. Orders are barked. The night isn't over. It never really is. Because here, in Genghis Khan's empire, rest is a luxury, survival is a skill, and comfort is a rumor spread by soft people from faraway lands. Still, as you pull on your boots again and mount up beneath a star-strewn sky, you can't help but feel it a strange sense of pride. You're dirty, sleep-deprived, slightly traumatized, but you're still here. You've made it another day.